Welcome to another episode of the OHL Podcast, presented, of course, by Matt Smith Goaltending. Train where elite goaltenders are created. Find them online at mattsmithgoaltending.com. We are speaking today with one of the 50 greatest Ottawa 67s of all time. We know so because the organization told us so. Jim Fox joins the podcast. It's great to have you here with us, and thanks very much for making the time.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thank you very much for having me.
How does that sound to you? One of the 50 greatest Ottawa 67s of all time. I mean, that's a proud Ontario Hockey League franchise there, Jim.
Yeah, and it's certainly where my athletic career, the best years of my life. Spent 3 years in Ottawa. Great city, great team, great fans. Just everything about that city brings back great memories, and of course the teams that we had, some real good teams there. So yeah, that's a proud moment for me, certainly.
I want to talk a little bit, just for a moment, about the city or town that you were in prior to Ottawa, because look, I'm Ontario born and raised. I've been covering this league for a couple of decades. I've never heard of Coniston, Ontario.
Coniston, yeah.
Coniston.
It's just outside of Sudbury.
Okay.
8 miles outside of Sudbury. I know you're in kilometers now, but I'm still in miles down here. So, and it was about 2,500 people. It had a smelter to refine nickel. Of course, with Sudbury, that was the main industry. So basically everyone worked for Inco, International Liquor Company. And it was a hard life. I mean, all of our fathers, moms, dad, everyone was involved in that. And it was really hard. Small town. I've been in every house in the town, When you think about now, I'm living in the suburb of Los Angeles, we're Redondo Beach. And, at times I don't even know my neighbors, the people next door. But growing up in a small town like Coniston, 2,500 people, you got to know everyone. If you were doing something bad, the parents would take you aside. Didn't matter who, and they would let you know and let you have it. And your parents were okay with that because everyone trusted each other to help raise all the kids. Really interesting sporting community. The arena in Coniston is the Toe Blake Memorial Arena. So Toe Blake actually grew up in Coniston. My wife's home that she grew up in, Toe Blake lived in it before she did. Or her family did. So just a lot of sports history, a very tight-knit community, and go back every summer. I've gone back every summer, and we'll go back every summer.
That's amazing. And when you mentioned Susie, your wife, I got to bring this part up because I see, and anybody watching on our YouTube channel will see that beautiful heart with the word love written in it behind you. Susie and you were elementary school sweethearts, Jim. That is a remarkable story in and of itself. We could do a whole hour just talking about that.
In Coniston, at the end of town, they built two schools at the same time. One was French and one was English. Exact same school, carbon copy of each other, right across the street from each other. So my wife Susie went to the French school and I went to the English school, and we met. I think I was in 5th grade, maybe 6th grade. She was in 5th grade, and that's when we met. And man, that's 41 years of marriage later. We're still together, so very, very happy.
Well, and you think about that, though, 41 years of marriage is one thing, but as a teenager, you're in Ottawa, then you get drafted by, of all teams, the Los Angeles Kings. I mean, I'm just thinking of the geography the two of you have covered as a couple. That's pretty remarkable as well.
It was. I played in Tier 2 junior at the time when I was 15 in North Bay. So that's about a 70-mile drive from Coniston. So we could go back and forth a little bit, but Susie would come visit me then. When I was 15, she was 14. And we would make the ride to watch the games, North Bay Trappers, and it was called the Tier 2 Provincial Junior A back then. I'm not exactly sure what they call it now. But it was the league right underneath the OHA or the OHL now. And so I spent a couple of years there, and then Ottawa, and she would come visit me in Ottawa. My first year in Los Angeles, we were not married, but she came at Christmas. Never forget Christmas. We're down on the beach, I live right on the beach in Manhattan Beach here. And playing beach volleyball on Christmas Day. And, that was her first real chance to see LA and the LA area, the beach area. Just phenomenal place to live. And the next summer we got married in 1981.
Incredible. Absolutely love it. Okay, so let's talk about that junior hockey career. And I wonder how close it was, Jim, to being a professional baseball career. I know you liked baseball growing up. How did you make the decision that hockey was where you wanted to go?
Well, that was done very early. It was, I remember in Pee Wee, we had a little team that was like D, I think, because of the population. We went to the Silver Stick tournament in Port Huron, Michigan. We ended up winning that for a little town. And that's, 12 years old. That's when I kind of started to think about it, really. I mean, had a great group of kids, still friends with everyone to this day. And that's when you started thinking about it. Again, you're playing, but, I'm a little bit ahead of most of the other kids. I think I had 210 goals one year. Like 70 games. We played a lot of games because we were playing tournaments all the time and traveling around the Sudbury area. And that was interesting. It was just a great way to live and grow up, and hockey and just the environment of all the small towns around Sudbury playing against each other. We didn't play Sudbury. Sudbury had their own league. But we were just kind of figuring things out there. And, you just kind of, I guess you kind of realize and you look around and you go, I'm doing pretty good here. And my dad was a real good baseball player. He actually came to Sudbury, the Sudbury area, to Coniston, because Inco gave baseball players jobs. And they had a real strong senior league back in the 50s. My dad was part of that, and real good teams. They carried on and, just played that way. All my brothers played. And that was something that we, as soon as the summer started, it was baseball season. So, but hockey was, Bobby Orr at that time, I was 10, 11, 12 years old. He was winning Stanley Cups with the Boston Bruins. And certainly I followed the Bruins and Bobby Orr, and that was it for me.
Obviously, you mentioned those 210 goals. Offense was never a problem for Jim Fox at any level that you played at, quite frankly. I wonder how much, though, Brian Kilrea in Ottawa worked on you to be responsible defensively.
He was the type of coach that really, he wanted his players to make it to the NHL. I know it's a business, the Ottawa 67s, and you have to win games too. Just a personal story. Like, I fell in between. I wasn't drafted my first year of eligibility. It was just that when they dropped the age from 20 to 18. So that first year I wasn't drafted. I was kind of in between, and there was only 6 rounds, I believe. But in the interim period, NHL teams were signing free agents, the guys that weren't drafted. And the Colorado Rock at the time were coached by Don Cherry, very close friend with Brian Kilrea. He wanted me, instead of coming back and play my last year junior, and he knew by losing me, it would have hurt the 6. He wanted me to go and play. He thought I could play already at 19 years old. He thought I could play in the NHL. And he thought with Don Cherry, a close friend, he would take care of me, make sure all that type of stuff. So he wanted, and I didn't. I said, no, I'm going to stay in. But that's how Brian was. He was always trying to make sure his players were promoted to the NHL. Somehow, find them a job in pro hockey somewhere. And that's the way he approached things. So his teams were always full offense. Offense. Scores, outscore the other team. We'd always get beat by Peterborough in the playoffs because they were the shutdown defensive team. But, that's, other than my dad and my family, my brothers and sister, Brian Kilrea had the biggest influence on me. I mean, he when he selected me to be captain my last year, that was the first time, when you're going up, you're always playing 2 or 3 years up if you're one of the better hockey players. So when I got to my last year, he made me captain, and I'll never forget that. I thought that was, because I remember going to practice, and you go blue line to blue line, and instead of going blue line to blue line, I would always start one stride before the blue line and go all the way one stride after the blue line, just to try. He selected me captain, and that was something that made me very proud to try to lead a team.
This is really interesting to hear from you, because you're not going to have a podcast called the OHL Podcast without having Brian Kilrea a part of it really early on. And so you're talking to Killer and he'll just go, I think the interview just ended. We went on and he's a great talker, great stories. And we talk about some of those legendary Ottawa 67s, right? The Denny Potvins and the Bobby Smiths and, Peter Lees. And he said, don't forget about Jimmy Fox. Everybody overlooks Jimmy Fox. Now, it was hard to overlook you in the year that you won Player of the Year with your 66 points, but we'll get to that in a moment. But he made it clear that Jimmy Fox should not be overlooked as one of the most offensively gifted players that he ever had the chance to coach.
Well, it was very interesting. My last year, I ended up getting a knee injury, so I played like 51 games. I think it was 66 games in the season. Anyway, I ended up with 65 goals and 66. I think it was 65 goals, 101 assists, I think.
Yep, that's what it was.
And I had the least amount of goals on my line because Sean Simpson, the centerman, and Yvan Joly both had 66. So that's how much we dominated offensively. We would just score at will. And I mentioned, Brian made me captain. The thing I take pride in the most is my final year. I missed games because of injury, but I was able to get at least 1 point in every preseason, regular season, and postseason game. So at least one. And that was something that, again, just the group around me. I'm going to miss guys, right? But, my line, Sean Simpson, Yvan Joly, Doug Crossman back on the blue line. One of the smoothest players you'll ever play. Bill Kitchen, big defenseman, passed away now. Rest in peace, Bill. Just a solid, big, take care of us. Like I said, I can go through the whole list, but those were my, Roy Cava, big, tough. You needed the toughness to take care of us guys. My first year, I marveled at Bobby Smith. Gretz finished second in scoring that year. Now, Bobby had him, I think, by 4 years old. But Bobby Smith had 212 points or something his last year. I could not believe how good of a player he was. He's big. He's like 6'4", 6'5", stick handle in a phone booth. He could do anything. And that was probably the best team I played on my first year. Our last year, we won the regular season championship, but didn't make it in the playoffs. We lost to Peterborough. But that first year with Bobby Smith, man, what a player he was.
You mentioned the Peterborough Petes, Jim, and I can't help but notice their role in your junior career too, because 2 of your 3 years you make the playoffs, and both those times, once it's in the first round, the next time it's in the second. But it was those darn Petes. Now, they had a bunch of good teams then too, so maybe in Ottawa's case it was just good team at the wrong time, because those were strong Petes teams. But looking back, that must have been the team that essentially had your number.
Yeah, it was, because my first year with Bobby Smith, Steve Payne, and Tim Higgins were the big line. We went into Peterborough one night, and so I think Gary Green was the coach then. They had Roger Nielsen and Mike Keenan. Later, they had the defensive coaches. And I remember we went in there to play, and they sent out their checking line to shadow. I'm talking about shadow Bobby, Tim, and Steve. They stood beside them and went everywhere. So what first whistle, Killer calls everyone over to the bench. He says to Smitty's line, "You get out there again. I want you to just go and stand at the far blue line." So they did that. The 3 Peterborough Petes stood right beside them, and both teams' defensemen played 2-on-2 the whole shift. That was the rivalry. Killer didn't like that Killer liked to open things up. He wanted, again, his players to be able to show their skill. And, Peterborough was the better unit, the better team. And that's what they did. But they played the entire first period because they didn't have to skate. They just stood at the line. And again, the defenseman went back and played 2-on-2 the rest of the time.
We're talking obviously 40 years ago in the Ontario Hockey League, a much different era of hockey, and you still being in the game, you know full well what I'm talking about with how much different it is now compared to then. And you referenced some of the guys you had, the late Bill Kitchen, tough as they come, Cavett, tough as they come. You as a skill player, Jim, were you targeted? I mean, how did the opposition treat you back then?
Yeah, I remember in my final year, first round of the playoffs, we played Oshawa. I think we ended up beating him in 7 games. Barry Toboggan, tough kid. He shadowed me the whole series. When we were on the power play, they would still shadow me. They would have a guy kind of stand there. That was the toughest series I'd ever played. I mean, man, you just had to work for every single inch. And finally, you just hope that there would be a breakdown somewhere and you'd get that 1, 2, 3 chances. And that's what he did. But no, when you're on the top line like I was, it was every time, like I said, regular season, it was not unusual for teams on the penalty kill. We had the power play. They would assign a man just for me. Because on the power play, we were really good. I remember with Cross as the quarterback and, me and Sean and Yvonne up front, we were tough to handle. So, I remember when I hurt my knee, it was in Kingston, our biggest rival. And I tried to jump around a guy and he hit me and I kind of tweaked my knee a little bit. I had medial collateral ligament was torn a little bit, not too bad, but I missed, 15 games or so. And I remember when I was being kind of carried off the ice and the fans were cheering that I was hurt. And that was kind of like, oh, geez, that's how serious it was. But again, I would never change a thing. I mean, never, just the way it went. Again, Ottawa was just a great, no, I wasn't drafted by Ottawa. I was drafted my 15-year-old year, 16-year-old year, number 1 overall in the Ontario draft by the Windsor Spitfires. And I went to training camp with Windsor and I just didn't feel comfortable. I was homesick. I couldn't say it at the time, right? I felt that would be embarrassing to everyone if I said I'm homesick. So I went home and I told everyone I was going to go to college route. And since I hadn't played a game yet for the Windsor, I was still eligible, right? Because once you play 1 game, you're considered a professional for college rules when you're playing Major A. And that was a very stressful time for me. I was homesick. I just didn't like Windsor. I couldn't get it. The place I was staying at, I just was very uncomfortable. So during that next season, I went back to North Bay to play another year in Provincial A, and Childer traded for me. Ben Wilson was the guy who went the other way, basically. There was a couple of other players, but that was the big name. So, and then if you can believe this, okay, so I'm public enemy number 1 in Windsor, right? Because I didn't go. I'm 16. I said I'm going the college route, which I did. I mean, I had offers from everywhere to go, but again, I went back and went to Ottawa to visit during the summer, and Bobby Smith picked me up and took me out and visited the whole town, and I just fell in love with Ottawa. Anyway, the following season, guess what? First game in Windsor. Referees cannot make it to the game on time. They're late somewhere, something's happening. So what they decide to do is have showdown. Shooter against the goaltender, right? 1 shooter from each team, three shooters from each team, kind of like they do now, but I think we all took like 5 shots. In my memory, so Killer picks me as one of the players to shoot. So we're in Windsor. Everyone absolutely hates me, and I don't blame them. I mean, I was first overall pick. I didn't go there. Man, oh man. So I ended up winning the shootout, and it was like, you talk about almost have to be police escorted out of a building. That was it. First game ever in Windsor, and that was I was just a basket case, but we had a real good team that year with Bobby Smith. Real good team.
Have they forgiven you in Windsor to this day, Jim?
You
Can
know
you go
what?
to the city, enjoy a good pizza?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people remember that. I mean, I do now. Now I can say it. Back then, again, I felt I couldn't say it. I felt it, it would be a sign of weakness to say, oh, I was homesick. Nowadays, I think everyone's learning that you can talk about your nerves and talk about all of that type of stuff. But back then, it was just kind of, you just didn't do that. So I didn't. Yeah, we went back every year and we played, and it was tough, but I really don't think there's an issue now.
You mentioned earlier about Don Cherry and wanting to sign you as a free agent, undrafted to the Colorado Rockies. You decided not to. Obviously, in hindsight, I think that works out pretty darn well for you. But at the time, as a 19-year-old kid, Jim, that must have been a tough decision to make. There's your dream, isn't it? The pro deal.
I was looking forward to my final year in junior. In my first year with Bobby Smith's team, I think we won the regular season points championship, and we had a great team. Didn't win. Next year, I had a decent year. We didn't win again, but then I just looked forward to that. And I mean, I remember Killer came to me. He said, and I was not as committed as I should have been. In my second year, I think I got up to about 205 pounds, and I was 5'8", and I was overweight, but I was still I was scoring still. It didn't matter, you get points. We had a good team, decent team. And Killer came to me. He said, you know what? The scouts don't think you're committed. They don't think you're good enough, but they don't think you want it bad enough. So I remember I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. I had 2 bacon and tomato sandwiches a day for 30 days. I started running and jogging, and so I lost 30. Now, not the way to do it. But I said, I'm going to show them. So I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. So I was basically, when I showed up at camp, I was 170. And that made a huge difference. Then I was like fast. I was fast before, but now I was really fast. And so that's, those things you're thinking about. And I just wanted to do it with, Ottawa and the guys that I started with. We played 3 years together. That was something that we needed to finish. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't a hard decision. It really wasn't. I wanted to play in Ottawa my last year.
What does that scoring championship mean to you all these years later?
It's, in all honesty, it's tough because I went to the NHL, had a decent career, but I didn't have the same success at the NHL level that I did in the junior level. So that's the way I believe. I didn't live up to expectations. And that's unfortunate because, again, in that last year, that line, we dominated. We absolutely dominated. So, again, I missed 15 games and played 51 at 166 points. We were unstoppable. And I know when I missed those 15 games, I had such a big lead in the scoring that I ended up winning it anyway. But Yvan was probably right there. Yvan Joly was right close to me. Sean Simpson, they were right there as far as points. And believe me, to play on that line and to have, and I know it was, then we didn't do well as a team as far as the playoffs went. But to play on that line, that was, again, I mentioned in my athletic career, were the best years of my life. And that last year with Yvan and Sean, that was, we were unstoppable. And of course, we got stopped in the playoffs. But you talk about having fun and just going into every game knowing that, it's going to be hard and they're going to be on top of you. But we were that much better.
10th overall, first rounder to the National Hockey League. There's something else they never take away from you, Jim. That's got to still feel special to this day. What was it like when it happened?
No, it wasn't the big hoopla as it is today. And that's fine. I remember I was home in Coniston and I just received a phone call. I wasn't in Montreal. I believe the draft was there. And I think they did basically the draft by like phone. I'm not sure if everyone, I guess, yeah, the teams did go. The teams had representatives in Montreal. But I didn't go to the draft. So just got a phone call at home and it was LA. And I really hadn't given a lot of thought about where or how or didn't. It was just, let's make it to the NHL. And that was good enough for me, for sure. That was just to know that then you go to camp and, I was a healthy scratch my first year 10 or 12 times. I mean, it wasn't like I jumped right in. After that, it was, I was a regular. But, to think about LA and, the Triple Crown line, Marcel Dion, Dave Taylor, Charlie Simmer, they were on fire at the time. We had my first year in LA, I think we were the fourth best team in the regular season. We had the best road record in the league for a team that traveled. Back then, it was 21 teams. We played 80 games. So we played 2 home, 2 away against every team. So we're traveling all commercial back then. So very difficult. But, then it was interesting to me is, I assume players go through it. Going back for my second year, I just felt so much better than my first year. I just felt so much more comfortable. I felt like I belonged, felt like I was going to make the team, felt like I was going to start to do better, and I did. But that was the first year was a lot of learning experience, and then after that, it was and I'm still here now, 40 plus years later, and that's something that's what I take a lot of pride in. I know my dad when he went to work for Inco. I mean, he had a tough job. He was a mechanic. He just fixed stuff in the refinery, and that's all. He hard blue collar work. But I always felt that he was proud to work for Inco. He was proud to go to work every day, and he worked for Inco his whole life. And right now, looks like I'm going to be working for the Kings. So that long, and that's something I take a lot of pride in, just to be here that long.
I can completely understand that. I think it's really cool. You talked about that first year, not in the lineup every night, but the team had a lot of success because the Triple Crown line was as good as it was. It was a pretty precipitous drop off in year number 2, Jim, points wise for the LA Kings. But if I've got my chronological order in place here, it was that second year that the miracle on Manchester happened. So the Kings have a lesser regular season. I think you were one of the second to last or last place in terms of playoff entrance that year.
I'm not sure. All I know is this: it is still, it was the largest separation in points ever in the history of the NHL for an underdog to win the series.
There you go.
Yeah, 50. I don't know how many more points than we did. I mean, they were way ahead,
and they were way ahead in that game.
Yeah, and we were under 500, I think, during the regular season. Yeah, and then we're in the series. We win the first game there in Edmonton, 10-8. How was that for a playoff? It was a 5-game series back then. They tied up and come back for game 3 in Los Angeles, the first home game, and we're down 5-0 after 2 periods. We're just thinking, like, people ask you, what are you thinking in the locker room between the second and the third? It's the same old cliche, let's go win a period. Let's go win a period. Well, we ended up tying it up. Daryl Evans scores in overtime. We scored with under 5 seconds left to tie it up to go to overtime. And then Daryl scores and then we ended up winning the series in 5 games against Edmonton too. So, which ends up again being the biggest underdog, 1 game and in a series.
So Daryl Evans, though, doesn't get the chance to score that goal in overtime if a young Jimmy Fox doesn't strip the puck from, of all people, Wayne Gretzky in the final seconds of that game. You're down 5-4 still at this point. What's going through? And also, if I understand correctly, you were the guy that came off the bench when the goalie left the net.
Correct. Yeah.
So how did this all happen?
when you're, so the pucks, we had a little pressure going on in the offensive zone. Goalie gets pulled. I just end up running, skating into, a million miles an hour. I'm the extra guy. Where's the puck? Where's the puck? Where's the puck? We had a little scramble around the net. It goes to the side, and Gretzky gets it. And he looks up, and he's just trying. And I just, you know what? And people ask me, now, well, it was Gretzky. You know what? To tell you that I knew it was Wayne at the time, maybe, but I just kind of knew how much time in the clock. You don't have much time here. So I just I just kind of spun my body around and took the puck. And I remember getting back to Mark Hardy, he shoots, and then the rebound, Steve Bozek scores. I think it was 3 seconds left, something like that. So yeah, that was, and that, again, now it was interesting because, now we get to go to an intermission between third and overtime. And now we're like, we believe we could win. I mean, we truly, and we ended up doing it with Daryl's goal. But I remember before game 5, we're in a hotel. To get to game 5, this is interesting. Because of the schedule and travel and all that, games 4 and game 5 were played in consecutive days. We shared the plane with the Edmonton Oilers to fly from LA to Edmonton because we couldn't, chartering back then wasn't as big as it is now. And teams, now we have our own plane and basically, so they shared. So I think it was, I don't know if Edmonton went on first, I guess. Yeah. And they all sat at the back, and then we went on and sat up the front. I think they actually had the referees kind of, on the same plane going for game 5. So, and I joke now that, people that when we boarded the plane, Edmonton was in front. I joke because I think they were in the back of me. And rest in peace, Dave Semenko. I said, yeah, I went by Semenko and I popped him a couple just, on the way to my seat and, just joking like that. But yeah, we had to fly in the same plane back. And then I remember we had a meeting that afternoon, early afternoon, after like a pregame meal. We had a meeting, and Mike Murphy was on the team at the time, and we talked about, a little strategy. Back then, there wasn't really any video sessions, but we talked a little bit of strategy. I'll never forget he just said at the end, he gave a little talk, and he said, if we do what we just talked about, we're going to win relatively easy tonight. And we went up winning, I think it was 7-4. I think it was 7-2 at one point, maybe 7-3. They ended up getting a goal late, but we beat them 7-4, I think, in the game 5. And that was, again, that's, and we have to joke now that we just made them mad enough that they won 5 of the next 7 Stanley Cups or something like that, because that's in the 84, 85, 86 Edmonton Oilers, maybe the best team ever.
Yeah, that's and they were just like, they were on their way up when you did this to them, right? They were a terrific hockey club, no question about it.
I remember, again, they played that weird style. So you'd line up on a face-off, and they'd win the face-off. And normally back then, as a forward, what you would do is you'd spread out, you go to your wings. They would skate back into their own zone and build up speed, European style. Watching the Russians and just so and then they come at you a million miles an hour. I remember, I played with Bernie Nichols mostly, as he was my centerman for most of my time here. And we didn't get the Gretzky unit. We got Messier and Anderson. That's who he played against the whole darn series. And I swear, I was begging to play against Gretzky and Curry because I could catch them. I couldn't catch Anderson and Messier. They were just so fast. And that was, if you go back and watch now, it was fun hockey because they were so skilled. But, we tried to keep up with them. They, like I say, 10-8 first game. So, but they learned their lesson. And after that, again, they just won a lot of Stanley Cups.
In that third game, the miracle on Manchester, when you come back from 5-0 down after 2 periods, I just recently had Doug Smith on the podcast. You assisted on the game tying goal, and I'm pretty sure he took the face-off in overtime to assist on the game winner.
Exactly, yeah. Right-hand draw, Daryl was on his off wing, left-hand shot on the right side. So Smitty drew it back, and Daryl just took one step and fired it. And it went right over the shoulder of Grant Fuhr. I mean, like a bullet. But yeah, Smitty took the draw.
I can't help but think, Jim, of the parallels in your career with Wayne Gretzky. I mean, obviously, we're talking about an upset, a huge upset, the biggest still comeback in Stanley Cup playoff history in the National Hockey League of your Kings over Gretzky's Oilers. By the time Gretzky joins the Kings and they make that 1993 run to the Stanley Cup final, you're on the broadcast crew. Did it like, was that weird for you at all?
Uh, no, I played against Wayne Jr. So he was with the Sioux. We actually played them in after my first year, first round. We played Sioux, but they had 8-point series back then, right?
Right. Yes.
So we actually had to play a game 8 in Sioux because they beat us in game 7, but it was like points, and there was a tie somewhere in there. 8th game, you played to the finish, but you could play it. So we played 8, and I can't remember the score, 3-2, 4-3. I scored with 30 seconds left to win the game. Bobby Smith behind the net, comes out, passes to me. Greg Millen's in net, I score. So we beat Gretz's team out. But I think I have as good an understanding of Wayne Gretzky's impact on the world of sports than just about anyone. Played against him in junior, played against him in the NHL. He joins the Kings. Basically, while I was hurt the first year he got here, I missed the whole season, came back and played only 11 games the next year, and then I retired with knee injuries. But then I went into the broadcast booth. Then they make it to the final in '93. Just all of this to see the growth of hockey, in LA. I mean, during that year that I missed, I went to the front office and I said, "Can I work for you guys in community relations?" We had our former travel guy, his name's Ron Muniz, he passed away. But he handled the travel, but he also did some community stuff. Now, before Gretz, no one was knocking down the door to have Kings show up anywhere. When Gretz comes, all of a sudden, everyone wants the Kings to be part of something. So I went up into the office and I worked in community relations from that year that I missed. And then the following year, I think basically I played half of the season, retired. And the following year I ended up in TV. But I was still director of community relations when I was doing the TV. And, golf tournaments. And we had a fundraiser that still, King it was called. All of these things didn't exist before Wayne. And when he came, he turned LA on its upside down. And again, now we think of, Anaheim and San Jose and Dallas and Florida and Tampa Bay and Nashville and all of these cities that probably would not, Gretz, he captured, LA is big, stars all over the place in Hollywood. And Gretz really, really caught everyone's attention here. And he changed. The reason I would move to TV was it's directly related to Wayne Gretzky. Because when Wayne came here, the Kings were doing a simulcast, meaning basically we only had 15 games or so on TV, but the signal was just one broadcast crew. It went on radio and TV at the same time. The only thing they had to adjust was intermissions. You'd have a special intermission for TV and a special intermission for radio, but the actual call of the game, Bob Miller and Nick Nixon, Bob Miller, Pete Weber, my first year, they called the game and it went out one feed. Well, when Gretz comes, they, higher ups say, well, you know what? 2 revenue streams are probably better than 1. And now that we have Gretz, all of a sudden, all the games are on TV, basically. One of the cable stations was called On TV, which ended up Prime Ticket, which ended up to be Fox and now Bally's. It was basically started on the Lakers and the Kings. And without Gretz, I don't think that would have happened. We wouldn't have been an attractive option to put on TV. So they split the radio and TV up, and they needed someone to be the analyst on TV. And I had just been recently retired, and I was the guy.
You seem determined to carry on that legacy, because aren't you like the president of the LA High School Hockey Association or something along those lines?
I was for a while. I no longer, when when I retired from hockey, director of community relations, started broadcasting, I was working. I mean, I would do a lot of games on TV where I would go to, I'd get up to work out at 6 a.m, be in the office at 9, basically pop out for the morning skate just to see what's going on. But I hardly talked. I mean, I back in the office, work till like 5 o'clock, boom, jump right into the TV production meetings, do the, get home at midnight. And I did that for 2 or 3 years, and it was too much. It was just too much. I was just, so I started to back off, but I still did a little thing. I'm still on the board of the King's Care Foundation, but I'll be honest with you, I don't have a hands-on responsibility like I did in the past. I mean, they'll ask me for my opinion every once in a while, but, and I was the commissioner of the LA Kings High School Hockey League the first year it started. So I helped get that off the ground, and a lot of things, again, the fundraisers. And I mean, when Gretz was here, we made a lot of money for charities, a lot of money. I mean, that was, he sponsors, boom, here's 50 grand. People's paying, money to go to an event like that or a golf tournament. It was crazy. And again, we can talk about all the great players we had, and Bernie Nichols and Dave Taylor and Marcel and all the, but when Gretz came, that was, Rogie was here for, then Luke and Rob and all the retired numbers. And it's Gretz he was the difference.
How did you like the transition from playing to broadcasting?
Difficult, because I was awful. I was just I have no problem now saying I think I do a decent job, but I swear for the first 3 years, I didn't even know the score of the game after the game. I was so caught up with the technical and people talking in your ear, and you're trying to talk, and I'm trying to do an interview, and producers talk. I just was really, really lost the technical aspects of it. And then, you just learn on the job, feel your way into it. Again, 93, when we went to the Cup, that was final. I was just starting to get it then. And then, of course, it was, back then we did all the games. Nowadays, you only do one round, and then national TV takes over. But back then, we did right through to the final. And that was really fun. And that's when I think I started to become a little bit more comfortable. But it took me at least 3 years to just figure it out. And I really struggled with, I was embarrassed because I knew how bad I was. I would try to listen to games, and try to learn, and I was just embarrassed by it. And but I'm so glad that they stuck with me. When I see now like a rookie starting in broadcasting, or even like a referee comes up and he's a rookie ref, and it's tough. They're just learning. And I always think back, well, they stuck with me. I'm gonna take it easy on these rookies, because there's a lot to learn.
When you bring up that 93 finals run, from your perspective, I'm wondering, Jim, what's going through your mind, and what you remember perhaps from the broadcast when the stick measurement's happening.
I remember being sick to my stomach. I was just, I felt, I remember saying back then you could, they had the big dishes, and you have the back feed where you could hear the announcers between whistles, if we go to break, commercial, you could still hear. So a friend of mine had one of those, and I know he's listening. I said, Rodney, we're not going to win another game. And we hadn't even lost that game yet. We went to overtime. And I just felt the whole, we beat them 4-1, I think, game 1. After coming off a 7-game series against Toronto, we're just beat to heck. That was the most physical series I've ever seen in my life. Toronto, McSorley, Wendell Clark. Just big boys going at it. So we had to jump 2 days later into Montreal and play them. We beat them, and we're up late in the game. And they asked for the measurement, tie it up, and win it in overtime. you talk about having your heart ripped out of your chest. You know, there's just, we were probably the underdog anyway, even with Gretz, but, you know, it would have been tough to win that series, but just if we could have went up 2-0, both on the road, then that's a whole different story. And unfortunately, we couldn't pull out game 2, and we didn't win another game.
Obviously, as disappointing as that was, the Stanley Cups, plural, did come. What do they mean to Los Angeles, to hockey in Los Angeles?
I think well, just coming off of the 93 that we were talking about, forgotten. Once you win, you forget. The bad stuff. And it all becomes worth it. I remember the parade. Because now the pressure is off, right? I mean, we're watching games. We're not doing the games yet because National's taken over, but the Kings made a deal with the NHL in 2012 to have Bob and I do a DVD of a clinching game. So we did game 5 in New Jersey. We lost. So it wasn't released. So we did game 6 and we won. So they released the DVD for charity that was sold to Kings fans and that. But to go to the parade a couple days later, because now you're not worried about winning, or you've already won, and you see the generations of Kings fans, like kids, older kids, teens, parents, grandparents, all watching. What a team. Up 3-0 in every series. Made the playoffs, second to last game of the season. But before that season started, I remember in our preseason special we did, I think, on Fox Sports back then. And I remember, you know, you're always asked for predictions. And I said, you know what? I don't think the Kings are a favorite by any means, but I said, I will not be surprised if they win the Stanley Cup. Because they had the best roster I had ever seen with the LA Kings. Best roster. And then, you know, they trade for Jeff Carter at the trade deadline. And that was basically the final piece. But that was a team, I remember that they never cared who got the credit. They just won. So, you know, that was the feeling and the parade to be able to celebrate. I mean, during the games, I'm a basket case, so I'm, you know, so nervous watching. But to finally win it, and then I remember after that game, Dustin Brown handed me the Stanley Cup. I say, my wife and I, Susie, it changed our lives. It just, all of the bad stuff went away in one cup. And then we had a chance to do it again 2 years later. So.
That is so special, Jim, to think of Dustin Brown passing the cup to you. And obviously you never got the chance to win that as a player, but there you were, still with this organization that drafted you back in 1980. And there you were.
And Dustin is, you know, as we speak, in a couple of days, he will have his number retired in a statue outside of Crypto.com Arena. I mean, representing all of those years as captain, the first American to win 2 Stanley Cups as a captain. And, you know, so that's coming. He played every single game with the LA Kings. That's just, it's hard to win.
Oh,
it is hard. I mean, 14, first 3 series, I think the toughest road to the Stanley Cup ever. I mean, just crazy, the teams that the Kings had to beat in 2014. Down 0-3 in the first series against San Jose. Then Anaheim, who were like on top of the league. Then Chicago. I mean, to winning all three of those series in Game 7 on the road. That was the series, Chicago, LA, Western Final. Best series I've ever seen. I think the Kings came back twice in that series after trailing 2-0 in the game. I think Chicago came back, won a game after trailing 2-0 in the game. And that was a different year because like the first 2012, the Kings again, they out-defended you to win the Cup. In 2014, in that Chicago, they outscored the Blackhawks. Great games, back and forth, high skill. I mean, it was incredible what a series that was. And then we 5 games against the Rangers, but that was. And again, and then in the year in between, we ended up going to the Western Final again against Chicago. Chicago wins the Cup. Those 3 years, you're talking about on top of the league. And to do that, these guys, you talk about being committed. It's hard to win. And they won twice and they came close another time.
You know, I find myself thinking as you're relating these stories that I'm thinking back on your father and Coniston and Inco and the blue collar. And here we are talking about your 40+ year career in the game of hockey. Like, it's not a bad way to eke out a living there, Jim.
No, it's well, very, very fortunate. Very fortunate. My mom played catch with me as much as my dad did. She was a lefty. We only had right-handed gloves. She would catch, take the glove off, throw with her left hand. My only sister, outstanding athlete. My older brother, Mike, played in the International Hockey League back then. My other brother, great athlete. My younger brother, all great athletes. My mom and dad were. That's what they raised us to always have sports in our life. Steve, my older brother, Kevin, my younger brother, Debbie, my sister, Mike, my older brother, my mom and dad. What a sports family. We didn't have much, but I remember my dad bought a 8mm, the old projector where you had reels, and my mom would take photos of us at track meets and ball games and hockey games, and that was you know, they surrounded us with sports, and it was, my whole family were great athletes.
How tough was it for you? Because you were still young. I think you were 29 years old, and I'm thinking back on, you talked about injuring that knee, going off the ice in Kingston, the fans cheering. That's how much those fans didn't like you as a member of the Ottawa 67s. But it was that knee really that was the Achilles heel, if you'll pardon the pun, in different body parts. It must have been tough, Jim, to hang him up at the age you had to hang him up.
Yeah, it was. But I remember playing in one of those 11 games. You had like 20, I had 20 games to play to decide whether I could play or not. You could take like an injury type of clause, and retiring with an injury, you could get some supplemental income. So you had 20 games to. So I only played 11. I just remember in Winnipeg one night, I think it was Sean Cronin, big tough defenseman. I remember I had him in the corner. He was coming right at me. So when the defenseman's coming directly at you, you got him, right? Because he's got to get an angle on you, and he just wasn't. He was a big tough guy, but he wasn't the fastest skater. And I remember trying to make a move, and bang, he hit me. And I went, what the? So I lost my quickness. And with me, I was very small, 5'8". And when I lost that quickness, I think I played a couple more games after that. And as the season went along, I was trying, you're hoping to get better. It was only getting worse because my knees were kind of basically eroding inside. And yeah, it was tough. It was tough. I remember like 2 years after I retired, it finally hit me. I finally said, you know what? I was like 31 years old. And I said, I'm 31 years old and I've already done what I've always wanted to do. And it's over. Like, what do you do now? I was working in the office at the time and just starting broadcasting. So I did jump right into it. So but it was tough. It really was tough. I talked to Dustin Brown the other day and, man, what a career he had and how hard he played and tough. And he says he feels great. And he said, you know what? He went out on his own terms. And he said, he feels great. And, for me, it was the other way. It was I was just starting to get it when I ended up getting hurt. I thought I was really becoming a better team player, a better all-around player, understanding the game a lot more. And, unfortunately couldn't go on.
What was it that helped you kind of start to get it, or who? I know you had Pat Quinn for a little bit. You had some great veterans like Marcel Dion and others, but is that where it came from?
Pat Quinn was important to me because I was a small, skilled player. And Pat, was a big, strong defenseman when he played, a tough guy. And he still respected me. I thought, maybe as a coach, coming from how he grew up, but he knew that you needed different types of players to have on a team. You can't have all tough guys. You can't have all skilled guys. And he really showed me respect, and I'll never forget that. I remember Roger Nielsen coming and he took over for a year and very technical and really, really started to think about the game when Roger was the coach. Really interesting the way he approached things, and again, the way he taught things of that sort. But I ended up playing for 9 coaches in 10 years, which was a bad problem for the Kings. We just didn't have any stability there. Those two guys, Mike Murphy as a player and then as an assistant coach, and he was really, I basically came in and took Mike's job because he was the older right winger and I was the new guy on the block, and he would stay out with me after practice and help me stuff, throw pucks around the board. You got to learn how to take that puck around the board. He'd throw 100 pucks after practice, and you just learn. And I was taking his job, and that's the type of team guy he was. He wanted to help the team get better. And like I said, when I ended up retiring, that's when I was really I think I was really starting to get, what it takes for a team to win. And you just kind of learn. You learn each year. You try to get yourself better. You learn, okay, now it's starting to work with this group. And you'll learn a little bit more. And then, you just have to go by the side.
Just before I let you go, I'm thinking back on talking about Dustin Brown. You mentioned the Jeff Carter trade, that first Kings run. Mike Richards would have been, of course, part of that team. And it takes me back, Jim, because as a guy that's been covering the Ontario Hockey League for so long, we love watching the players that come up through our league into the pros. And I think LA that year had one of the strongest, if not the largest contingent of former OHLers in the league. That old league that you developed in is still doing pretty well, I guess, eh?
It is. We all joke now, and the college kids are coming up, but then the Westerners and the Quebec guys, we always joke and, what the best league is. We certainly believe the Ontario League was the best league, and the players that have come up, it was. And I think that Dave Taylor, who helped put that team together as a general manager, Dean Lombardi takes over for the couple years. I think they knew what the best league was, and that's where they went to get their players.
This has been an absolute treat. Thank you so much. Oh, I didn't even ask about, real quick, wine. How did you develop the taste? And you got into winemaking.
Yeah, I think it started mostly after I retired. There's a local restaurant here in Hermosa Beach called The Bottle Inn, an Italian restaurant. Actually, we'll be going to dinner there tonight as we speak. Just started to go there and, like most hockey players like to have a beer. They, try this. The wait staff there was so helpful, try this here and have a little. And I really didn't like it. The old Chiantis, very acidic and not a lot of fruit. And then I remember it's Rodolfo, the server, brings me a glass of white wine from France. It was actually a blend from the Rhone region, which is like grapes, you probably Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier, blend together. And I had a taste and I went, wow, this is pretty good. So then as I kept going to the restaurant, they would bring me more different kinds. And so then I said, you know what, how the heck do they make this stuff? So I started to take classes, very simple, tasting classes, 101, wine 101, geography. And then when my wife and I would travel, we would end up going to wine regions here in Sonoma and Napa, but also around the world, Italy and France and mostly Spain, Portugal. So we would always take seminars. Then we came back and we were playing a charity golf tournament. And a friend of mine says to me, what would you like to do? And I said, well, you know what? I'd really like to make wine. And he said, well, why aren't you? I said, you know what? I did a little research. It is still the #1 failure rate in California, even more so than restaurants. There's over 5,000 wine labels in California alone. So it's very difficult. So I said, I don't want to lose money. I don't want to invest it. He said, here's the money. So he gave it. He said, this is not a loan. This is a gift. So we started Patinets Cellars. Patinets is the French. It's the past participle of skate. So to have skated. So Patinets Cellars, our branding and our labeling, our label is basically it has the texture of a puck. It's not rubber, but it's silicone because you can't have rubber because rubber smells, and you can't have something with an odor on a wine bottle because that would take away from the appreciation you're going to get from the wine. Anyway, so we have our packaging. We sell basically in 3 bottle packs. The pack is a skate box. Basically, if you remember opening up a skate box, the way they fold it in. We have skate lines on the ice in our packaging. But our first vintage was 2011. Mostly Pinot Noir, highly acclaimed by the critics. They love it. They rate it high all the time. Just released a month ago our first Chardonnay, first white wine. And later on this year, we'll release a Cabernet. Well, Mike Smith is our winemaker. He's not the goalie. And there's a Hall of Fame jockey also, Mike Smith. But he does a phenomenal job for us. So Patinets Cellars, patinetscellars.com. We really take a lot of pride in what we do, and it's a great product.
I've visited the website and I can tell that you do. It's just terrific. It's a hell of a long way from Coniston, Jim.
That is.
This has been just terrific. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing these memories. It's been a great chat. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.